boys, and for this episode, we are going to talk about 5 rules in Magic the Gathering that changed the game forever. What are your hosts? Let's go ahead and find out. For number 5, the 4-offs. Yep, you heard it right. You see, in the early days of Magic, there is no such thing as a limit to 4 copies of the same name cards. You are free to put in any amount of any card in your deck. Have you heard of the combo Channel? Fireball? I'm pretty sure you heard of that name, but it's actually a card. Well, 2 cards, Channel and Fireball. Now, all you gotta do is to stack up your deck with a bunch of Black Lotuses, and then cast Channel, and then Fireball, and then you win the game. You'll win the game that easily. And because of that, kind of thought, well, Magic is a little too boring for everyone, right? So they come up with using the same idea of playing cards 4 of the same name in one deck. And that's the history behind the 4-offs rule. For number 4, Mana Burn. Not so long ago, Mana Burn is part of the comprehensive rules of Magic. So what is Mana Burn? When a phase ends, any unused mana left in a player's mana pool is lost. That player loses 1 life for each 1 mana lost this way, and it can't be prevented or altered by any effect that affects damage. When Emptin was released, according to R&D, they considered the rule to be too complex and unnecessary, as players do not suffer loss of life for unused mana anymore. Come to think of it, when was the last time that you actually overspend in casting a spell, right? One part of the reason. The second one would be it's not a new player friendly kind of rule. For example, in my experience, I realized this rule when someone actually pointed out to me. And this was way back the early 2000s when I'm still literally a new player. According to Mark Rosewater, it also freed up design space, meaning they can create cards without actually worrying about mana burn. And because of that, we are now enjoying the effect of not having mana burn in the rules anymore. Number 3, the Mulligan rule. Magic's earliest Mulligan rule is as simple as if you draw your opening 7 cards and you don't have any lands, you just have to show it to your opponent and you get to draw a new 7 cards. Oh, and you can only do this once per game. Of course, eventually it got changed throughout Magic's history. The first one was introduced in 1997 in Paris, the Paris Mulligan. If you are not satisfied with your opening hand for any reason, you don't need to show your hand to your opponent anymore. Shuffle it back to your library, draw a new one with 1 fewer card after shuffling, and you can take multiple mulligans until you're left with 0 cards in your hand. And then the next one would be introduced in Vancouver in 2015. And how it works, you return your opening hand if you're not satisfied with it to your library, shuffle it, then draw a hand of 1 fewer card, except this time you are allowed to scry your top deck and decide on whether you wanted to keep it on top or put it at the bottom. And then the most recent one is the London Mulligan. So this is the newest and the active Mulligan rule. So if you're not satisfied with your opening hand, shuffle it back to your library, draw a new set, and then if you're satisfied with it, take 1 card and put it at the bottom. If you mulligan twice, you still draw 7. Once you've decided that you're all good to go, you take 2 cards and put it at the bottom. Now, how did it affect how we play the game today? As you can see, the optimal play where everything starts with what you're holding on your opening hand is very inconsistent in the early days of Magic. Now, the next one would be the Legend rule. You see, we have to look back in Magic's history to understand a little bit more about the Legend rule. Legendary creatures and lands were first introduced in 1994, and guess what? In Legends, the game's 3rd expansion set. And as we all know it, there are players who exploit the Legend rule, and they manage to do so in different ways. So anyway, the first Legend rule, if a legendary card come into play when another copy of the same card was already in play, then the one that comes in second goes away. For example, if I already have Urza in play, and you cast Urza, yours straight to the bin. Yep, that's how the legend rule works the first time it was introduced. And then eventually they've decided to change it. Regardless whether who cast it first, they both die. They both go to the bin. Why did Wizards change it that way? As it turns out, whoever cast the first legendary creature gets the advantage. This is the most used and abused rule. So Wizards doesn't like how that works. You're using your ability to turn one of your creatures into a legendary copy of your opponent's legendary creature or legendary permanent just so you can kill them. Wizards think of it as unhealthy. So they change it again in 2013. You don't care about your opponent anymore. As long as you put a second copy in your board, that's the only time that you sacrifice one of them. And you get to choose which one. At least, in that way, you get to decide which one you copy, and it only benefits you and doesn't affect your opponent. It doesn't come in play as a removal or anything similar to that, and that's how Wizards decided to do it, which I think is really good. But the legend rule, in many ways, affect how the game works since 1994. And for number 1, the stack. What is the stack? The simplest definition of the stack is this. The stack is the game zone where spells and abilities are put when they are played, where they wait to resolve. Now, what does it mean? It allows players to know the order of the spells, triggered abilities, and or activated abilities on the stack, to know which goes first, then so on and so forth. That's why it's called a stack, because you're putting them on stack. This also allows players to easily explain the stack rule, even to new players, as it is a much easier rule to understand. Easy, right? When everything is in chaos because of a bunch of spells that has been cast, the stack gives us order. And that is our top 5. If there's anything that you know that should be included in my top 5, let me know in the comments. For now though, see you again on the next episode. Ciao. One of